This is DBrief, brought to you by the Australian Industry Group.
Welcome to DBrief. Thank you for joining us. My name is James Scotland.
And I'm Louise McGrath.
Hey Louise, we've got lots to talk about today. We're in March already, and there is a lot happening in industry policy and industry development. I thought today we could talk about digitalisation and artificial intelligence. It's kind of the topic of the day. There's issues around critical minerals in the decarbonisation space. Lots of things to talk about in global trade and elections, and maybe even the federal budget might be worth a mention. So we've got lots to chat about. First though, for those who didn't have a chance to listen to the preview, can you tell us what this podcast is all about? What are we going to cover? What are you excited about?
Thanks, James. Well, I'm Head of Industry Development and Policy at the Australian Industry Group. The AI Group, as we shorten our name, is a 150-year-old national industry association. We represent a range of companies and sectors, primarily in manufacturing, but those companies that service the manufacturing sector, such as technology, engineering, and transport, those sorts of services, as well as an expanding reach into the care economy, ICT, and a whole range of sort of the industrial sector, and also some retailers. So what we get to see in our roles around industry development and policy is that it doesn't matter whether we're working on building codes, electrical standards, waste management, supply chains. There's three big themes that are confronting all of our advocacy and industry development work. And they are digitalisation. So how do we get the country to digitalise to make sure that we improve our productivity and our international competitiveness? The pathway to net zero, so decarbonisation, how are companies managing that transition, how are governments managing that transition? And lastly, diversification. We could see that during COVID, supply chains were disrupted. There's a whole range of decoupling going on and geostrategic movements. So diversification of supply chains, but also diversification of business models and really the structure of our economy. So we're going to attempt in, 30 minutes or so every month to cover all these issues. And the industry development and policy team have this clear role of lifting industry, so helping industry to understand what's going on, but also the policy side, the advocacy, making sure that the governments, as they too grapple with these changes, are aware of the impacts on industry.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think you've covered that well, but I'm excited because when I was running businesses, I learned that to manage my business, I need to understand the economy and the industry. I need to see what's coming my way and to understand how to adapt that to the way I run my business. So, I'm trying to answer those questions, understand what's going on in industry development and policy and what it means for your business. Which brings us to the topic of the day, artificial intelligence in the D part, or the digitalisation part of the Ds. I was talking to a friend of mine who works for one of the big four banks, and she was saying, I can't believe that AI is all of a sudden a topic of discussion because we've been using it for 20 years. Whenever you go onto a bank site and a little thing pops up that says, hi, it's Rosie, how can I help you today? It's not Rosie, it's Rosie the machine. And I said to her, I think now it's in the lexicon more because businesses are starting to think about how they can implement it. And that brings up a whole lot of moral issues or ethical issues. Our producer, Carlos, played something for me the other day that was my voice saying, hello, this is the real James Scotland. And then it started reading a script from Lord of the Rings. And I've never done that, but it sounded great. So it sort of raises these ethical issues. Do you want to talk about where industry is up to?
Yeah, so we have an interesting role at our group. So we're thinking really how to make sure industry doesn't get left behind. As you say, banks, insurance companies have been using AI for a long time. It's technically an old technology in terms of machine learning. Every time you get an aeroplane and there's a co-pilot or a autopilot, that's AI. So AI is not old technology, but constantly evolving, and it's been around for a long time. But its capacity now has changed, and that has raised ethical issues. And the Australian government and AI Group has signed up to the Responsible AI Network, which means that we are working with CSIRO and the National AI Centre to both ensure that members are aware of the opportunities. We're holding a whole bunch of events around the country, putting tools in the hands of our members to get them to explore what they can do, but also mindful of how to use it responsibly. And as I always say to the government and CSIRO, people don't buy AI. You buy a solution for a problem, and it might have some AI in it that's, running the thinking in the background. But when it comes to regulation of AI, we have a couple of clear principles. And one is that the regulation should be focused on the behaviour, not the technology. So if, for instance, we want to make sure that people don't lie and mislead customers, which is, pretty basic standard, whether you're standing on a snake oil box or you're sending out faxes or you're using AI, the behaviour and the outcome is illegal, not the technology that's being used.
Is AI going to take my job?
Well, there are some people who say that AI won't take your job, but the person using AI, if you're not, will outpace you. I think jobs will change as they always have. We don't have we don't have people going around lighting our lamps anymore, our street lamps. We don't have milk delivery drivers. There's a whole bunch of jobs that come and go. There is some challenges for those for whom sort of voice and image can be a threat. So we saw that actors strike. You talked about your experience of having your voice used. Anyone who saw the latest Indiana Jones movie and a young Harrison Ford, which was using AI, it was quite extraordinary. The capacity for that is quite broad. I think, though, as people come to understand responsible use of AI, what it comes down to is human agency. So how can we make sure that humans understand the decisions that AI is making? Because otherwise, if AI is just using historical data, there is a real risk that we entrench discrimination and disadvantage, which is not at all what, I assume all of us, but it's not what we want for our society and for our economy going forward. I think when I think about the jobs that are at risk, I'm not so much thinking about the jobs of today. I'm thinking about the people doing the jobs of tomorrow. So I've got an add-in in my Teams license that does a summary of meetings. So more than the transcript. So the basic one gives you the transcript. This gives you a summary and says, so-and-so said this and gives you tasks. And it's okay. It's about the same as if a graduate was to come along. So they don't really know all the terms, probably aren't 100% sure on everyone's name. And it's okay, and it'd be a good start, and you'd use it as a learning opportunity, and you'd get them to understand what's important in a meeting, how to take proper notes, and to understand the topic. Now, I don't need that intern anymore because I've got AI. So that's fine, great, very efficient. But I wonder about where that intern is in 20 years, because the thing I value most about my career is the opportunity to make all those mistakes and to learn from them.
Yeah.
And I think we have to think carefully, as we get excited about some of this low-grade work, so low cognition, high-value work, which is where AI will be, where do people learn? And it might be that they just start jobs at a higher level, and that's a question for universities. Are they producing the right graduates to get people at a higher level? But I think we may need to be more conscious on how to expose people to that low-level work so that they learn in a low-risk environment.
Yeah, I think this is a great issue, and I'm sure we'll pick it up as we move through the podcast series. I always think about machine learning. Once upon a time, for people that are really old like me, we used to have to go through tollways, and you had to find $1 or something or other. And if you didn't have $1, you had 5 20-cent pieces, and you had to hand it to the person, and the person counted it, and then they let you go through. It was a really dumb process. And of course, one of the worst jobs in the world, the poor person getting the coins pushed in their hands, got their hands ruined. And the amount of people that died from running across from toll booth to try and get home was unbelievable. Well, not died, but hit by cars. It was a really bad job. Now you can go into a shopping centre. They say you're allowed here no more than 3 hours a day, and you can come and go as many times as you like, as long as it doesn't add up to 180 minutes. The machine's figured out.
So you mean driving into the car park?
Yeah.
You can walk into the shopping centre anytime you like, yeah.
You can walk into the shopping centre without, drive into the car park, and the car park can say, okay, you've been here 4 times today, but you still haven't used up 180 minutes. That's very smart technology. And that means that the dumb job is taken out and replaced by very smart AI or machine learning. I like that analogy.
Yeah, I like that too, because I think of the wasted human capital on those low cognition jobs, and how we can make better use of that capital. Now, is there a risk that some people, there are jobs that some people could only ever do will no longer exist? Potentially. So we have to make sure that we don't leave people behind. Not everyone is able to do sort of the high level job. So then what do we do? We need to make sure we're still maintaining an inclusive society. But a similar example, one of our AI industry days, one of the scientists at CSIRO mentioned or talked about his box counting robot, which can count a warehouse at about 96% accuracy. And they're hedging on the time. They seemed embarrassed, and they said, 6 hours. The impact amongst members in the room was just palpable. They just said, someone said, I've got 3 staff full-time counting boxes. So, and of course, that's a safety issue because bored people do stupid things and take stupid risks. So, it actually improves safety. It, as we digitalise things, it will help understand where you need to be in the decarbonisation journey. And also, I think, your expertise, James, in supply chains, I think when we digitalise supply chains using AI, it means that we'll be able to predict and prevent incidents rather than constantly reacting.
Yeah, there's a story that Amazon Prime has in Los Angeles. I heard this from a person from Amazon Prime at a conference. He said that they've got a 3-hour delivery window in Los Angeles, which is a massive city. And so if you go on, or if your daughter goes on to Amazon Prime at 3 o'clock in Friday afternoon, almost certainly she's run out of mascara or lipstick or something other than she wants that. So the machines are already heading over to that area of the acres and acres of warehouse as she's typing in her identification. Whereas if I go on at 5 o'clock on a Friday, they go, we better send the machines over to the red wine because he's obviously buying red wine. They make predictions based on whoever it is that's logging on, and the keystrokes are based around that. It's very clever learning, very clever use of machine learning.
I was going to say one of the challenges with all these great technologies, fantastic it is that, as we talked about Harrison Ford and yourself, it is creating this trust deficit.
Yeah, not many people put Harrison Ford and me into the same sentence, so thank you for that. I appreciate that. The trust deficit is interesting because around the world there's a lot of elections going on at the moment, and they are starting to use AI mischievously. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so that is the risk. It is the year of elections, as you say. There's something like over 40% of the world's population is voting in an election this year. And the role of AI on misinformation and disinformation will be significant. It means that micro-targeting will be increased. It will be moving faster than regulators can really keep up. And this is a significant year for elections because the outcome will really shape the world for us in the sort of next decades. 3 elections in particular that I'm really watching are the US, India and Indonesia. There's a lot of other elections, but unless you're a complete political nerd going to a trivia, I think you probably won't care about what's happening in Bangladesh and Bhutan. They've just had their elections this year already. But the reason why I'm focusing on the US, India and Indonesia, the US I won't talk about too much because there's plenty of coverage in the general press, probably not enough on India and Indonesia. Both those 2 countries are, technically non-aligned. So when it comes to a vote, will they align with the US? Will they align with China? Will they align with Russia? It's up for debate. So the outcomes of those elections will be really significant as we think about Ukraine, as we think about Gaza, as we think about other big global decisions that we need to make. They all have complicated relationships. Well, they both have complicated relationships with both the US China and Russia.
Indonesia has had their election and they've got a new president. The vice president, deputy president, is the son of the former president, and everyone is madly trying to figure out what it all means. The big question, I think, for Australia, and particularly Australian trade, is what's the relationship with Australia vis-a-vis their relationship with China?
Yeah, so Indonesia is very interesting. So the on their election day, it was the world's biggest election day. So, millions of people all vote. They have a public holiday, make sure everyone can vote. Indonesia is very interesting. We have a couple of free trade agreements with Indonesia. We have RCEP, which is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and we also have our own bilateral free trade agreement with Indonesia, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or ISEPA, Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership.
That's easy for you to say.
So I think the thing with Indonesia, everyone talks about opportunity, and it is a huge opportunity. But what I've learned 20 odd years in international trade, opportunity is the least thing you need to worry about. There's plenty of opportunity. It's the execution. What's interesting about Indonesia, though, is the increasing role it's playing in the region, and it's growing into its own confidence. I think Jokowi and its hosting of B20 and G20 really lifted their confidence and their role as a leader within ASEAN. They are talking to OECD about membership, which is really interesting because OECD is sort of the Western liberal economic model. So the fact that they're thinking of aligning to that is good for us. On a digitalisation side, it's a challenge because the WTO at the moment has a moratorium on putting tariffs on the flow of data across borders. Indonesia and India both are against that. They want to put tariffs on data flows at the moment because they see it as, money left on the table. It would have significant issues for everyone and we really push back our efforts to digitalise our supply chains at the very least. So the outcome of that election, what the potential new president says, how he engages with the world is really important. But also Chinese investment, as you say, James, Chinese investment into Indonesia and its role in the development of value-added nickel exports.
Which is a nice segue, or to continue. It's not even a segue, just continue. Let's talk about critical minerals because that's relevant to this conversation. To remind everyone, critical minerals are the minerals we need in order to build the society that we want. Started out in the 1940s, I think, Louise, where they said critical minerals were the ones important for building washing machines and refrigerators. That was steel and copper and other stuff. But now, of course, it's all about the technology and the cars and computers, whatever. We have a lot of critical minerals in Australia. They've got critical minerals in Indonesia. There's critical minerals in China. It's going to be competitive, isn't it? It's going to get crazy competitive. And how does it all work?
It will get competitive. It is already competitive. So nickel is interesting because it is talked about as, one of the components in EV batteries. But I think at the moment, the majority of the nickel being produced is still being used in aluminium. So I'm not sure we've even realised sort of the full scope of where that could go. So China's heavy investment in nickel value add. So when Jokowi got into government, became president in Indonesia, he said, we're not exporting raw nickel. I'm probably using the wrong term, but whatever, it needs to be value added, which has really shaken the market. And it's those in Australia would notice that in the last couple of weeks, Rio Tinto announced that they were closing their nickel mine because they just simply couldn't compete with the prices. The market's really crashed from the volumes. But when we had the Inflation Reduction Act announced, by Biden, I guess it's well over a year now. Time flies.
I would say it's over a year now. I mean, and it's pretty implemented too, isn't it? I mean, we're starting to see impacts. Anyway.
Yeah, we are. We're definitely seeing impacts. But when it was first announced, Australia really became a little bit smug, I think, because they said that if you are to get these credits, the critical minerals need to come from an FTA partner with the US, which primarily was Canada and the US. And we thought, great.
And us.
Yeah. And us. Sorry, Australia. So we thought, great, home run. We're locked in. We didn't perhaps appreciate that then the US would gift that as part of their geostrategic play. And so they have gifted that right also to Indonesia. They've given some sort of elements to Japan on their EV batteries and a whole range of other things. So
politics is only for people with these FTAs. Oh, well, you can play too. Oh, you can play here. Yeah, you can play.
But we did give us some confidence that there would end up being two markets in the world: the sort of Western high value market for these critical minerals, which would mean that there's no forced labour, that environmental impact is minimised, that Indigenous rights are captured and acknowledged, and we really, I think, in Australia got a bit overconfident in the ability for consumers to make those sorts of decisions when they're deciding what car to buy. We probably overestimated the power of this ESG element.
Yeah. But keep an eye on that space. We'll come back and talk about it a bit more. The last thing I want to talk about is the federal budget is going to come up soon. And to my mind, this is always an opportunity for industry to influence industry policy because you go where the money is. What's the process? Is it really a way that we can influence policy, or the government just going to do what they think and we'll just make a whole lot of noise?
So we've put in our submission mid-January, towards the end of January, where we gave our vision for a digitalised, decarbonised, diversified Australian economy and the elements that we thought would support that. I think you've heard me describe policy, James, in the past as like water dripping on a rock. Sometimes you see the rock break, sometimes you don't. But all those drips are important. And this is one of the drips. So this informs our conversations with government advisors, with bureaucrats, not just from now until the budget, but all year. So the budget is normally in May in Australia, and we'll see what happens. We've put in some pretty bold asks, particularly around decarbonisation. We're getting down to the hard stuff now. It's nice to talk about net zero goals. Great, that's the easy part. Now, how are we going to do it?
There's a lot going on. What an interesting month. I look forward to picking up these issues next month. Talking about decarbonisation, one of the issues is that there's a premium to pay for transitioning the economy from an established process into a new process. There's lots of talk about it being cheaper in the long run, but in the short run, we have to go through this transition, which always hurts. Are you starting to see this?
Yeah, I think, there's been a lot of work from ACCC, the Australian Competition Authority, on greenwashing. So companies who are falsely claiming or just, being vague on their green credentials, and making sure that consumers are truly informed on if they're going to make a decision that's sort of ethics-based, that they're actually making decisions based on the truth. And there is a lot of talk, and we've had these conversations with members, that the world is shifting, the consumer is shifting, the consumer is becoming more demanding and really wanting to understand the ESG credentials of your supply chain, so environment, social and governance credentials of your supply chain. Are you using forced labour? Are you creating any environmental damage? And do you have good governance principles? But as we detailed in the critical minerals conversation, what we're discovering is that people like to do the talk, but it's when you're putting your hand in your pocket and making that financial decision, it isn't always coming through. And, I think the announcement a couple of weeks ago that Body Shop in the UK has had to declare bankruptcy. Body Shop's, old established company now, has long had really good ethical principles, targeting that part of that consumer market that everyone says is driving this change, which is sort of young girls or young women, and they couldn't make it work. So I think while, I'm not suggesting that companies shouldn't go this, we can see that banks, investors are really pushing these changes because, part of the net zero journey and ESG requirements. It's really essential, but it can't be the only thing. It can't be the only part of your business model. You still have to have a good product. You still have to be price competitive.
Yeah, it's in my mind, talking about supply chains, it has to be a value add. So if you more than just a ethereal value add, it really has to add some value. And I think we can get there. We just have to learn the lessons, and it's a shame about Body Shop, but it's probably a case study for universities in the future, which is pretty brutal. But that's the way of the transition. This has been a great conversation. We should wrap up and come back again next month. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. So I want to give people some extra reading or homework if they're keen. So the two things. One is and we can put in the show notes, our pre-budget submission. So that's available on our website, but we'll put the link if you want to read it. But also we released a research note this week on the decarbonisation transition. So which industries are making the best progress and which ones have a bit further to go. So if you're interested in that topic, you can have a look at that research note. And we'll probably talk about it a bit more next month.
Which I look forward to. I better do the homework as well. I think I've read most of those, but I better go back and check so that you can ask me questions about it. Put me on the spot. Well, that's it for our first episode of DBrief. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed the show, remember to like and to subscribe. And we'll talk to you again in a month. Thank you, Louise.
Thanks, James. It was good.
Talk soon.